The morning sun filtered through my kitchen window as I sat alone at the table, staring at the single card I'd bought for myself, just in case. Father's Day, the one day of the year when a parent hopes for even the smallest acknowledgement from their children. I'd raised Sarah single-handedly for 23 years, and yet here I was, waiting by the phone like some forgotten stranger. When she finally called, her voice was ice cold. No happy Father's Day, no warmth, just obligation dripping from every syllable. "Dad, I need to tell you something," Sarah said, her tone cutting through the silence. "All these years you've been waiting for gratitude, for recognition. Well, here's the truth. You deserve nothing." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the phone tighter, feeling my chest constrict. 23 years of sleepless nights, of working double shifts, of choosing her needs over my own happiness. And this was my reward? "Nothing?" I whispered, barely able to form the word. "Nothing," she repeated, her voice gaining strength, as if she'd been rehearsing this moment. "You think being a father makes you special? You think I owe you something?" "Well, I don't." The line went dead. I sat there in my empty kitchen, the silence echoing louder than her cruel words. But what Sarah didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment longer than she could imagine. My mind drifted back to when Sarah was just 3 years old, the day her mother packed her bags and left us both behind. "I never wanted this life," Linda had said, not even looking back as she walked out our front door. That night, I held my crying daughter and made a promise she would never want for anything. I remembered the countless mornings I'd wake up at 4 a.m. to work the early shift at the factory, then rush home to make her breakfast and walk her to school. While other dads coached Little League on weekends, I was working overtime to pay for her dance classes, her art supplies, her college fund. There were nights when I'd eat nothing but crackers so Sarah could have a proper dinner. Birthdays when I wore the same worn-out shirt for years so she could have the latest fashions. I turned down dates, declined promotions that required travel, and put my own dreams on hold, all so she could chase hers. When Sarah got accepted to that expensive private college, I took out a second mortgage on the house. When she needed a car for her internship, I sold my grandfather's watch, the only thing of value my family had ever owned. Every sacrifice felt worth it when I saw her smile, but somewhere along the way, my sacrifices became expectations. My love became a given, and my daughter became someone I no longer recognized, someone who could look at a man who gave her everything and declare he deserved nothing in return. "You know what, Dad?" Sarah's voice had grown sharper during that Father's Day call, each word carefully chosen to wound. "You're suffocating. You've always been suffocating. Do you think guilt-tripping me with all your sacrifices makes you a good father?" I tried to speak, to defend myself, but she wasn't finished. "My therapist says you're emotionally manipulative, that all those years of doing everything for me was just your way of controlling me." Well, guess what? I see through it now. The phone felt heavy in my hand. Therapist? When had my little girl started seeing a therapist? And why was I the villain in her story? "Sarah, honey, I never meant to." "Stop calling me honey," she snapped. "I'm 23 years old. I have my own life now, my own family. Marcus helps me see things clearly. He says you're toxic, and you know what? He's right, Marcus. Her husband of 6 months, who'd never worked a day of overtime in his life, who'd never changed a diaper or stayed up all night with a sick child. Marcus, who drove the car I'd helped buy and lived in the apartment I'd helped furnish. "You deserve nothing from me," she continued, her voice now calm and cold. "Nothing. I don't owe you gratitude. I don't owe you respect. And I certainly don't owe you love just because you're my biological father." When the call ended, I sat in my kitchen for hours, her words echoing in the silence. But what Sarah didn't realize was that respect and love, like inheritance, are gifts that can be taken away. Over the following days, I began to see the signs I'd missed. Sarah's coldness hadn't appeared overnight. It had been building for years, piece by careful piece. Her visits had grown shorter, her calls less frequent. Family gatherings became obligations she endured rather than celebrations she enjoyed. I remembered last Christmas when she'd rolled her eyes at my stories about her childhood, as if my memories of raising her were somehow embarrassing. The way she'd grimaced when I'd shown Marcus her old report cards and art projects. "Dad, please," she'd whispered. "You're being weird." Marcus had been the catalyst, but the resentment had been there all along, waiting for someone to validate it. He'd filled her head with modern psychology terms and convinced her that my love was somehow unhealthy, that my sacrifices were manipulations, that my devotion was control. I thought about the conversations I had overheard when they thought I was in the garage. Sarah complaining about my expectations, about how I made her feel guilty for living her own life. Marcus agreeing, telling her she needed to set boundaries and protect her energy from toxic people. Toxic, that's what my own daughter thought of me. The father who'd worked himself to exhaustion for her was now the villain in her story. The man who'd put her needs before his own for 23 years was now suffocating and manipulative. The love I'd poured into raising her had somehow become a burden she needed to escape. But as I sat in my study that night, looking at the legal documents I'd prepared years ago, I realized that Sarah was about to learn a very expensive lesson about gratitude. The house felt different after that Father's Day call. Quieter somehow. Not just empty, but abandoned. I walked through rooms that still held traces of Sarah's childhood. The pencil marks on the doorframe where I'd measured her height each birthday. The small dent in the wall where she'd thrown her backpack too hard after a bad day at school. I'd kept everything exactly as it was, hoping she'd want to share those memories with her own children someday. Now I wondered if she'd even want her kids to know me at all. That evening, I sat in my recliner, the same chair where I'd read her bedtime stories, helped with homework, and held her when nightmares woke her up. I thought about my own mortality for the first time in years. At 67, I wasn't getting any younger. My arthritis was getting worse, and the doctor had been making concerned noises about my blood pressure. What would happen to everything I'd built when I was gone? The house I'd paid off through decades of overtime? The savings account I'd never touched, always thinking it would help Sarah and her future family. The life insurance policy I'd faithfully paid into since she was born? I'd spent so many years planning for her future, ensuring she'd be taken care of even after I was gone. But now I had to ask myself a hard question. Did someone who thought I deserved nothing truly deserve everything I had to give? That night, I made a decision. I walked to my study and opened the safe where I kept my most important documents. Among them was a manila folder I'd prepared years ago, hoping I'd never need it. But Sarah's words had made that choice for me. Part 6. The Lawyer's Letter. 3 days after our Father's Day conversation, I placed a call to Robert Chen, my attorney for the past 15 years. Robert had handled my divorce, my will, and most importantly, the special provisions I'd added to my estate planning 5 years ago. Frank, Robert's voice was warm but professional. I got your message. Are you sure you want to activate the conditional clause? The conditional clause. I'd added it after watching a friend get treated terribly by his own children once they learned about his money. It seemed like paranoia at the time. A safety net I'd never need. But Sarah's words had triggered every condition I'd outlined. I'm sure, Robert. She made her feelings very clear. Within a week, Robert had prepared everything. The official letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in a thick cream envelope with his firm's letterhead. I held it for a long moment, knowing that once Sarah read its contents, there would be no going back. I called her that afternoon. "Sarah, I need you to come over. There's something important we need to discuss. Dad, I'm busy. Marcus and I have plans this weekend, and it's about your inheritance," I said quietly. The line went silent. "Then my what?" "I think it's time you knew about my will, honey. There are some things you should understand about your future." I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. Suddenly, the father who deserved nothing had something she wanted to know about. "I'll be over Saturday morning," she said, her voice noticeably warmer. "Should I bring Marcus?" "If you want him to know about your family's financial affairs, that's your choice." Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Part 7. The Reveal Begins. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept, rehearsing this moment in my mind. At exactly 10 a.m., I heard Sarah's car pull into the driveway. the Honda Civic I'd co-signed for when she graduated college. She knocked rather than using her key, a small detail that stung more than it should have. When I opened the door, Marcus stood beside her, his arm possessively around her waist. He wore that smug smile I'd grown to hate, the expression of a man who thought he'd won something. "Hi, Dad," Sarah said, her voice artificially sweet. "Thanks for inviting us over." Us. As if Marcus had any right to be part of this family conversation, I led them to the living room, where the lawyer's letter lay waiting on the coffee table like a loaded gun. Sarah's eyes immediately locked onto the official envelope, and I saw that familiar flash of greed, the same look she'd had as a child when she wanted something expensive. "So," Marcus said, settling into my couch like he owned it, "Sarah tells me you wanted to discuss inheritance? That's very responsible of you, Frank. A lot of parents wait too long to have these conversations." I almost laughed. Marcus calling me by my first name, as if we were equals, as if he had any standing in this room. "Yes, well," I said, picking up the envelope, "I thought it was time Sarah understood exactly what she stands to inherit from me." Sarah leaned forward eagerly. "I know you've always been good with money, Dad. The house is paid off, right? And you've got that life insurance policy." "Read this first," I said, handing her the letter. "Then we'll talk about what you're entitled to." She tore open the envelope with the enthusiasm of a child opening Christmas presents. But as her eyes moved across the legal text, her smile began to fade. "I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at me, then back down at the letter, reading it again. "What does this mean? Conditional inheritance clause." Marcus grabbed the letter from her hands, his lawyer training kicking in as he scanned the document. I watched his face change from smugness to confusion to something approaching panic. "Frank, this is—" Marcus started, then stopped, reading more carefully. "This can't be legal." "Oh, it's perfectly legal," I said calmly. "I had it drawn up 5 years ago with one of the best estate attorneys in the state. You see, Sarah, I added a special provision to my will. If any of my children ever declared that I deserved nothing from them, or showed clear disrespect for the sacrifices I made raising them, then their inheritance would be redirected." Sarah's face had gone pale. "Redirected where?" "The house goes to your cousin Jenny. You remember Jenny? The one who calls me every week, who visits for holidays, who actually seems to appreciate family. The savings account, the life insurance, the investment portfolio, all of it goes to establish a scholarship fund for single fathers trying to put their children through college. You can't do this." Sarah stood up, the letter crumpling in her shaking hands. "I'm your daughter." "Your only child." "Yes, you are my only child," I said quietly. "And 3 days ago you told me I deserved nothing from you." "Well, Sarah, the feeling is now mutual." Marcus was frantically reading the legal language, looking for loopholes. "There has to be a way to contest this." "Undue influence, mental incapacity. Good luck proving that," I said. "I had a complete psychological evaluation when I signed this document. Dr. Martinez can attest to my complete mental competency. And the condition was very simple. Treat your father with basic respect and human decency, or lose your inheritance." "You chose poorly." Sarah collapsed back onto the couch, the reality hitting her like a physical blow. All those years of taking my love for granted, all those assumptions about her secure future, gone with a few cruel words on Father's Day. "Dad, please," she whispered, tears starting to flow. "I didn't mean it. I was just— Marcus says I have anger issues about my childhood, and my therapist thinks—" "Stop," I said firmly. "Don't blame your husband. Don't blame your therapist. You're 23 years old, Sarah. You made a choice about what kind of daughter you wanted to be." Marcus stood up abruptly. "This is emotional blackmail. You're manipulating her." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. This man who had poisoned my daughter's mind against me, who had convinced her that my love was toxic, who had benefited from my generosity while teaching her to despise its source. "Marcus, you've been living in an apartment I helped furnish, driving a car I helped buy, married to a woman I raised and educated, and you have the nerve to call me manipulative?" Sarah was sobbing now, the full weight of her loss settling in. "Daddy, please." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean those things." "I love you, I do." "Please don't do this. For a moment, just a moment, I felt my resolve waver. This was still my little girl, the child I'd tucked into bed every night, the daughter I'd loved unconditionally for 23 years, but then I remembered her voice on Father's Day. Cold and dismissive. "You deserve nothing." "I'm sorry too, Sarah," I said softly. "Sorry that it came to this. Sorry that you needed to lose everything to understand what you had." As Marcus stormed out, muttering about lawyers and legal challenges, Sarah remained on the couch, staring at the letter that had just changed her life forever. The silence stretched between us, heavy with 23 years of love, sacrifice, and now loss. "There is one thing," I said finally, and her head snapped up with desperate hope. "The clause can be reversed. If you can prove to me, not with words but with actions, that you truly understand what you've lost, what I sacrificed, what family means. If you can show me genuine change over the next year, I can amend the will." Sarah's eyes brightened slightly, but I held up a hand. "But understand this, Sarah. It won't be easy. It means cutting ties with anyone who convinced you I was toxic. It means genuine therapy, not sessions where you learn to blame me for your problems. It means rebuilding a relationship based on mutual respect, not entitlement." "I'll do it," she said quickly. "Dad, I'll do whatever it takes." "Maybe you will. Or maybe you'll realize it's too much work and decide you don't want my toxic money after all." I stood up, suddenly feeling every one of my 67 years. "Either way, you have a year to decide what kind of daughter you want to be." As she left that day, I stood at my window watching her car disappear down the street. I felt no satisfaction, no victory, just the quiet dignity of a man who had finally stood up for himself. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give their child is consequences. And sometimes love means saying no, even when it breaks your heart to do it. My daughter had learned that respect, like inheritance, must be earned. And for the first time in years, I felt like I deserved better than nothing. I deserved at least that much,